Welcome to the Meet Me podcast, a podcast all about our multifaceted human nature and constant journey through self discovery, with personal stories and insights around trauma, motherhood, relationships, spirituality, and individuality. I'm your host, Michelle Malik. Thanks for listening. Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Meet Me podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Malik, and through this podcast, I hope to support others in viewing their trauma and experiences and transmuting them into power, purpose, and connection. Excited to share another guest conversation with you today that I shared with Leah Rose. She is a spiritual medium and mentor who found this calling after her divorce. And such an inspirational story. She shares her reclaiming of herself that she went through and the work that she now does for others. I also really enjoyed aspects of our conversation that really highlight the fact that all of us innately have some sort of connection or psychic gift. It can manifest in different ways depending on the individual, but we do have access to that information. And if that is something that you're interested in diving into more, Leah let me know that she is going to be starting a psychic foundations course. So highly recommend that you check that out if you're interested in developing your intuition, your psychic abilities. That is a new course that she will be adding in addition to some of the offerings she shares towards the end of the episode. Also, really quick shout out since it is now the 1st of May. Can't believe we are already close to halfway through the year. It's gone by so fast, but I'm so excited to officially offer shamanic healing as part of my healing sessions, in addition to Reiki, which you can still book separately if you'd like or have a combination of. Those offerings will be updated for booking on my website as well as listed on Instagram in case you want to DM me for any, small questions. I am still offering free consultations as well, but so excited to add that to my Rolodex of offerings. I've been on this journey towards shamanism for about 4 years now, so it's just a really exciting time to get to utilize new tools and techniques and provide those to others. And it's truly such powerful and potent medicine that I hope to get to share with so many of you. As always, I am so appreciative of your time and your energy in listening. Let's go ahead and dive into the episode. Can't wait to share with you again soon. Well, welcome to the Meet Me podcast, Leah. Such a pleasure having you on.
Well, it's so nice to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I would love to start by just giving you the opportunity to introduce yourself a little bit about your journey, kind of what led you into the work that you're doing today.
Okay, sure. So I am a spiritual medium and mentor. I'm also a mom of 3, and a wife. And what led me here? So my whole kind of spiritual journey really was triggered by my divorce. And so I was in a 10-year codependent, very toxic marriage. So I decided to get divorced, and it was the best decision that I could have made for my whole family, including my ex-husband, because we all went on our own kind of healing journeys, right? And now today, my ex-husband and I are great friends. We're excellent co-parents. Like, we spend holidays together and the kids are really happy. So my divorce was a really good decision for my family and for my situation. But the amazing thing that happened is that I went through a very profound spiritual awakening during that time. And basically, what happened was I had to kind of look at my whole life and what led me to that point. And that involved a lot of understanding my past trauma, my patterns, and understanding the beliefs that developed because of those things and what role I played in my marriage. Because up until then, I had been, felt like a victim. And what I realized is that relationships are just mirroring back to us where we need to heal, right? So when I did that, I also started to understand the concept of the ego versus the soul. That led me to a deeper understanding of how to navigate my life. And so as I learned to listen to my higher self, I started to get curious about different spiritual tools and avenues for, a deeper sense of self, for more clarity, for more confidence, for all of those things. And so the first thing that I did that really was just had such powerful impact on my life was breath work. And when I did breath work, I was kind of catapulted into this space of presence. And I realized that I was in the space of my higher self. I was in the space of unconditional love, unconditional peace. And I realized that I held that within me and I could access that anytime. So as I started to do more breath work and release a lot of the emotional trauma that I was holding, I started to understand that I was energy, I'm energy, and I can connect with my higher self, but there's also a whole spiritual world that I can connect to as well. And so my intuition really started to open, and I started, doing mediumship. I started connecting with people's loved ones, with their higher selves. Then I started, I started learning more about shamanism and how everything is energy and we can connect with anything that we want. And so, yeah, it's been a wild ride. And now today I offer, one-to-one sessions with people to help them navigate their life's challenges and to really tap into their inner selves, their higher selves. I also work with divorced women now too, to help them through the process of healing after divorce.
Yeah, well, that is such a beautiful story. And you talk to a lot of commonalities. I think most people who fall into the spiritual path, there usually is like a turning point for them, some sort of trauma event, and then you're kind of faced with the choice of how you want to approach it, whether you want to, again, be the victim and allow that to overtake your life and your decisions, or kind of take that power back. And I love that you went in that direction. And it's also great that you have that relationship with your ex-husband, that it was kind of just definitive for everybody involved that it would be best to separate and you're able to maintain that co-parenting relationship. I know that's not easy for everybody, but kind of going into obviously what led you to that decision. 10 years is a long time. What are some things that you provide as advice to maybe some of the women going through it on your side, like those early stages, or maybe coming to that decision of separation? Because I imagine that wasn't easy and it definitely wasn't something that happened overnight.
Right. Well, I think the reason why I stayed so long is because I didn't really have a sense of self. I didn't have anything that was grounding me or guiding me. So I just listened to external sources to kind of figure out my problems. And I didn't understand that all of these things that were happening, I was playing a role in them. And what I realized after my divorce, and this is the key, I think, is that our bodies, our emotions are always showing us what's right for us. It's a way to understand whether you're veering off track or if you're in a place of peace or love. So my whole marriage, like I was feeling all of these it was an emotional roller coaster, right? And so I didn't listen to my emotions and how I was feeling. I kind of was just like, okay, this is my job. Like I need to hold everything together and, make everything work and help my ex-husband and do all the things. And I sacrificed my own needs in the process. And so, yeah, like learning how to listen to your emotions and also learning that you have a soul, right? So like your higher self, whether or not you're on the right track if it feels like peace, love, inspiration, motivation, all of those things are aligned with your highest expression and your higher self. So if you're feeling emotions that aren't aligned with that, well, it's showing you something. And it's not necessarily that, it's the other person's fault or this, that, and the other, but it's a moment where you need to pause. Like, this doesn't feel good. Why? What is it showing me about myself? And how do I learn and grow from this? And if I had done that during my marriage, it would have had a very different path, But up until then, I just really had no sense. I didn't know that I had a place that I could go to really look for guidance and clarity. And so it was just like always external sources. Like I remember calling my mom, my sisters, my friends. I'm like, oh my gosh, can you believe this? And what do I do? And, and it was like never a source of knowing from within. And so I think that that was really pivotal thing. Once I started to really identify, like, what does the ego sound like? What does the soul sound like? And what are my emotions showing me? Because like all of those things play into really they're just showing you whether or not you veered from your highest expression, right? And like where you need to heal and then where you can get back on course. So I think it's really important when you're in a marriage, well, anytime, but I think it's really important to take time for self-care, to really listen to your emotions and really kind of try to identify like, what is it in this moment that would guide me back to peace, to love, to inspiration, to all of those things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that is a struggle for a lot of women and men too. I mean, anybody in any sort of relationship, I think there is a lot of pressure around kind of becoming the person that your partner wants you to be, or maybe who your family wants you to be, all of these expectations, like you said, that come from the outside. And it feels sometimes unnatural for us to really turn inward, to look into what it is that I need. Who am I under the surface? Who am I outside of these labels and these relationships? And that's something I am strongly passionate about as well, but it can be really difficult. Like when you're a wife, you have these wifely duties. When you're a mother, especially, I think that's like one of the biggest things I see in people I've worked with is like losing themselves in motherhood because your kids are so demanding of your time and your energy, but really taking that time and intentionally setting aside a space for yourself and kind of tuning in and listening to yourself is really pivotal. So was that something that you kind of started prior to the actual divorce being finalized? Was that where your sort of mindset started shifting leading up to that decision, or was it really after the dust had settled that you kind of found that place within?
Yeah. Well, it was more so after the divorce that I really started to understand all of these things when I had the time and the space and the perspective. Because when you're in it, it's so hard to really see things clearly. But I do remember specifically one day, like I had just reached my rock bottom. And I heard this soft, gentle voice in my head, and it said, Leah, it's time to go. It's time to go. And what I realized later was that was my higher self guiding me. That was my inner knowing speaking to me. And so that's why I actually made the decision. I was like, this is it. Like I have to follow this. And there was a feeling of like of knowing when I heard that. And that's when I started to understand that like there's something else that's guiding me here. But the real work came from understanding all of the things that we just talked about. And when I say ego mind, it's really just the brain negotiating for love or safety, right? Your brain always wants to avoid loss. And so it's that ego mind that's constantly like saying like, oh, you're not good enough, or oh, you don't deserve that, or whatever it is to kind of keep you in the place that you know and that's familiar. Yeah, when I realized that that was actually just showing me where I had veered off track in conjunction with my emotions, then I was like, okay, how do we bring it back to a heart-centered space? But it took some time to just like understand my role and like really identify without judgment. It's not about blaming or judging yourself or your ex or whatever. It's really about just like observing and kind of identifying like what are the beliefs, what are the patterns that led you here. So yeah, it was definitely a process,
Of
but
course. Yeah. None of this is overnight. I mean, I think a healing journey is it's continuous, right? There are triggers
yes.
that come up that maybe haven't come up before. And now you're like, oh, okay, this is a new
Yeah.
experience. Let me figure out what this one means. It's a constant work in progress. I totally hear that. And I think that ego mind, when you talk about it as well, it's a lot of unlearning that we have to do in order to quiet that voice because the ego is really sort of rooted in our upbringing, what we were told as children, what we were told from the people that we surround ourselves with. And if you're surrounding yourself with people who maybe don't fully understand what it is you're trying to accomplish or understand your point of view or how you're viewing a situation, it's really hard to not listen to it because that's kind of all you know. So it's great that you started that work, and breath work is a great tool because it really drops you into your body. It kind of forces you into a present moment because of the intensity that you can feel at times. And so when did you start to discover mediumship abilities? Was that something that kind of just like sparked up and happened, or was that also a gradual process for you to develop?
I mean, breath work definitely was like the first kind of step to me, like understanding presence. And
Hmm.
once I understood this space of presence, then I started to work with it in meditation. I actually took an intuition development course too, where they kind of taught you how to meditate and connect. But yeah, it was really a process of being in presence, of getting your ego out of the way, like you're just in presence, setting your intention, and really trusting the messages that came in. But yeah, I wouldn't say it happened overnight. I think I definitely, it happened pretty quickly for me, I would say. I think some people are more naturally inclined to flexing that muscle of being in presence and connecting with the energy, but I think it's something that we can all do. It's just a matter of training your mind to do it. But yeah.
Yeah. And I think that like training to trust is the biggest part. I mean, I know I struggle with that sometimes where I'm like, okay, is that my intuition or am I making it up because that's what I want? Or is it my ego trying to keep me, where I need to be? I feel like right now where I'm at in developing my intuition, I'm sure you can speak to this as well, is like I'm finally starting to identify that they sound different. Like their tones are a little bit different in my mind. I don't know if you experience that as well, or I can kind of tell if it's like a nervous thought or anxiety versus the ego trying to keep me in place versus like the truth and the that knowing that you sense when it's like, okay, no, this is really what the message is. And really trusting that because I think it's also hard again with society and all of these things of like, oh, you're just making that up. You just made that up in your head or that's not really real. And so quieting that as well to really find that truth is so tough.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And one thing that's really always helped me, and this is the way that I always start any of my sessions or any of my meditations, is the connection process. Have you ever done the connection process?
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that.
Okay. So it's really cool. Basically, what you do is you inhale the air, your breath into the body, and you imagine it going down through your body all the way to the core of the earth. And then you inhale that energy back up through your body, and then you connect it to the divine, to your higher self, however you want to imagine that, to God, source energy, whatever it is. But then what you do is you continue to inhale it down and then connect it to the earth and then bring it back up. And what happens in this process of pulling it down and through your body and up and through your body is you create this channel of energy, and it brings you into this state of presence. And at that point, that's when I call in my guides, my angels, right? And a lot of, also like another tip, a lot of anything when you're doing anything mediumship, anything working with energy, it's all about imagination. Like the way that the spirit world communicates with us is through our reference points, which is our imagination, right? So the other thing that I do is when I have my channel and I can sense my guides around me, I also put my ego in a box and it goes outside of the channel until later. And I just ask to receive any messages without bias or opinion. And I ask to receive them for the best and highest good of all. And then when I'm connecting with someone else's energy, I imagine my energy coming from my heart space and connecting it with theirs. And I can feel that energy. And so I sit with it. And that's when the messages will come in. But yeah, I mean, I think for everyone, it's different. Like you look at some mediums who just work with people who have crossed over, like a lot of those mediums, I mean, they're just like seeing dead people, like spirits everywhere. And that's not like, I don't see that. I go into meditation and I create my channel, and then that's how I start to receive messages. So it's a little different for everyone, but I find that the connection process, it's all about like setting your intention, getting into that state of presence, and then allowing your imagination to guide you, but trusting it. But the second that like fear or doubt comes in, you know your ego has crept back into your channel.
Okay.
Because in
Get it
that,
out.
yeah, like in that space, it's just present. So you're not thinking about the past or the future. You're just in that space and you're just allowing yourself to receive. And I think that's the hardest part is like when that ego creeps back in, it's like, no, no, that's not right. Or you're just blah, blah, blah. That's like the fear-based mind coming in. And that's what's taking you out of that state of presence. So it's kind of blocking the whole thing.
Yeah, no, and visualization, I mean, is such a huge tool. I've been using it a lot. I actually am in a shamanic academy right now. And just in general,
Cool.
with like my meditations, I'm one of those people where it is really hard to just like sit still and be quiet and, not have thoughts or try to find that silence. So I typically find that like visualizations are really helpful for me because it's giving my mind something to do. So that cleansing of the channel sounds really powerful. I'm definitely going to try that because I've done other things where, you're being engulfed by like the light and those types of things. And you can really feel the energetic
Mhm.
shifts in your body and definitely have had, channeled messages come through in that way. With me, like, and I don't know what your process was within your mediumship journey, like, how do you identify maybe where the spirit or the message is coming from? Have you found kind of like a practice that helps with that sort of separating, oh, this is from somebody who crossed over, this is from their highest self, this is, what kind of categories that you split them into?
When I speak to their souls or their higher selves, it tends to be it's almost like it'll play out more like a movie where it's like it'll show me kind of like their current challenge or path of healing. And it shows me like it'll show me how they're feeling. And then it'll kind of show me like how to work through it and then what it looks like on the other side. So it kind of like gives me like a roadmap for them to
I love
like move through whatever it is. Whereas like when I speak to like loved ones who have crossed over, it tends to be like more like they're just showing me, they're like validating that they're them. So like I'll see, oh, and also another thing for visualization, I set it up where like I'm connecting through the heart space, I'm connecting with their soul and their higher self. And like I know what those messages sound like, but for loved ones who have crossed over, they come in through a door
that.
up like in my field of vision. So like when they come in, I'm like, oh, well, that's a loved one who's crossed over. And then what they do is they end up showing me, like I said, like if they had dark hair and a mustache and they used to like to wear baseball caps or whatever, they're going to show me those things. And then I'll just ask them questions and see where it goes, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and just kind of allow them to communicate in that way. And you're opening my eyes to a lot of things too, because and I'm sure a lot of people who have started down like some sort of spiritual journey, it's like it can be really confusing when you start getting those different forms of communication. I know there's all the different players, like it could be through hearing, it could be through sight, it could be through just the feeling and the knowing. And I think for me, like when I was developing my psychic skills, I really was focused on like, I need to see it because I have before. I've had moments where I see things really clearly and I know exactly what I'm looking at. There are other times where I'm like, I have no idea what I'm looking at. Like, why are you showing me this? Okay, maybe I'm not
Yeah.
getting the message, and maybe that's when I need to tune into like what I'm hearing and kind of putting it all together. And so, yeah, but I think just allowing those things and having sort of boundaries around your practice is really important too. Like, I love that you mentioned having a door for people who have crossed over to come through because you don't want to like open up the floodgates and everybody's coming in at once and you don't know like which message is
Yeah.
for you or those types of things. So having like energetic boundaries is so important in that type of work, I'm sure.
Hmm. Yeah. And you touched on one other thing. When you're seeing something and you're not
Mm.
quite sure what it is, that's happened to me many times. And one thing that helps me is feeling into the image. Like, what does the image feel like?
Because it could be maybe more emotion based versus.
Yeah. Like sometimes what I see will be really abstract. It'll look like a storm or like, I don't know, like, and when I feel into it, it's like, oh, they're showing me an emotion or they're showing me, that state or a cycle or something like that. And it's not always something that you can just have like an image for. So it ends up being like very abstract. But yeah, that's one thing that really, and I remember early on when I was learning how to do this, I was practicing with a friend and she said, feel into the image, feel into what that image feels like. And then you can just kind of dive into the energy of that image even more. And
Mm.
it just gives you a whole new layer of understanding.
I love that. Yeah, that makes total sense because I think again, like the ego mind, right? Like my first thought is if I don't understand something I'm seeing, I'm like, what is this? You know what I mean? I'm just
Yeah.
like, okay, well, I don't really understand. I guess, maybe I'm not supposed to have this message or something like that. But kind of reframing it, I think that we're always shown something. There's always purpose to whatever it is we're being seen, especially in those, energy healing sort of environments when we set up sacred space and all of that. Nothing is by accident, but there's a lot of things that are not linear. There's a lot of things that, don't make sense to us in the physical realms. And so just more of the feeling and kind of removing that expectation of it needs to look or sound or be a certain way.
Yeah, which is another great practice. Like if you're trying, like for those of you out there that are trying to really open your intuition or tap into your psychic abilities, one thing that I found really helpful was just sitting in a state of presence and observing, because it teaches you to not judge. It's just like you're just in there and you're just observing. And then as you're in there and just observing in this state, like that's what you bring into your readings.
Yeah.
Or like when you connect, you know what I mean? Like you bring in that sense of presence where you're just like in this observation mode, of just like receiving whatever energetic information comes in. But it took me some time of just like being in presence.
And releasing
Just,
that control, I think is such a tricky
oh
thing.
yeah,
Is like,
totally.
we want to find the reasoning behind every single thing. We want to know exactly what it is. And with this
Mhm.
kind of work, it's like you have to release that expectation because there's so much that we don't know and so much that we're just going
Yeah.
to discover along the way. So like allowing that to just happen and just be there for it is so important. And now I am curious because you mentioned you're a mother of three. How has this work or these developments in with your intuition and kind of the path that you started leading to, how has that changed your motherhood journey?
I mean, I think just even understanding the way that my mind is working versus like what my soul is telling me was like such a pivotal and profound learning in my life. And also like how to listen to my needs and my emotions. So when I'm parenting, especially even to like co-parenting, like, emotions still come up. Like your kids are living in a different house and you can't control what's going on over there. So I have to be aware of like what is the ego mind telling me, right? Because you can go down a spiral of feeling resentful or fearful or whatever, but you have to be able to distinguish, like, is that based in truth? Right. And that's where you have to bring it back to your soul. But as far as like my kids and parenting is concerned, I think number one, I have to set aside time for myself because I notice when I don't, I can't show up for them the way that I need to and the way that they need me to be there. But also, it's been a lot of fun because I've been exploring. I've done like Reiki on them and I've shown them like oracle cards. And like my one son is all into crystals. And so I've just basically been instilling in them that number one, you don't just die when you get older, you know what I mean? Like we are energy and we continue on and our loved ones are still there and we can call on them. So I'm teaching them that like it's not just the end of the story when you die. And also to trust what they're like. My one son is very, very imaginative and he's very like it's really amazing to watch. And he'll tell me that he sees things or he hears things. And I'm like, okay, like, yeah, trust that. And I'll ask him about it and whatever. So I'm very open to letting them explore and be imaginative without, being like, oh no, that's not right. Or that couldn't be. So I'm kind of trying to encourage that in them. And also too, I've been trying to a lot of the work that I do also is nervous system regulation because you can't really tap into that space of presence unless your nervous system is regulated, unless you feel calm and safe. And so I've been working with them a bit to, deal with the big emotions, which is difficult because sometimes kids don't always want to stop and take deep breaths when they're mad. They just want to be mad. And so, you have to hold space for that too. So yeah, it's been a journey. I'm not an expert in the parenting thing. Like I'm just doing, the best I can and just kind of trying to learn from my kids, like what they need and kind of grow with them, I guess.
No, absolutely. I love that. And I think that alone is like setting them up for success in the terms of like they won't have as much to unlearn like we did. I know That's something I really focus on. I mean, my son right now, he's 2. So throughout my pregnancy, during the newborn stage, even every now and then today, I give him little Reiki here and there. So I love doing that. And obviously, he is still in his tantrum throwing phase. So I'll have conversations with him about like taking deep breaths. It's not fully registering, but there are times where he's not in tantrum mode and he's like, sees somebody else upset and he's like, it's okay, take deep breaths. So I know it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
ingrained, even if they don't show it all the time. But I think just like allowing those things and children are such open channels too, that like allowing them to trust in whatever it is they're sensing and whatever it is they're feeling. I don't know how much you know about like past lives, but that's another thing I'm like totally up for if my son has memories of a past life. Like, let's talk about it. Like I want to know who you were before you
Yeah.
reincarnated to be my son. And I think that just openness allows the child to just trust themselves more and trust their experiences. And it's hard when you're being told constantly that it's fake or whatever. Like just let the imagination run wild.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think that that's a lot of that's the key. Like it's just kind of conditioned out of us to trust that part of ourselves, that imagination. It's like, oh, that's not real. That's not true, blah, blah, blah. And so it's like conditioned out of us to not even look inward and trust what we're feeling or sensing. I feel like when I was younger, when I was a child, I was just like my one son that I was just telling you about. And I remember just having these like grand adventures in the woods and like, everything was like so magical. And it's funny because, as an adult, you can still tap back into that, especially like with shamanism and stuff, when you start to like learn about how everything is alive and you can connect with it all. It's a process of remembering.
Yeah, going back home to like who you truly are. And yeah, that's another thing I've been realizing a lot lately too, as I have done, really deep inner child and shadow work and all of these things. But I'll have like random memories these days as I'm developing into my intuition of moments when I was a child that I like saw, heard, or experienced
Mhm.
things that didn't have explanation, brushing them off constantly. But now that I revisit those times, I'm like validating, the little version of me, like, no, what you felt was real. And now it's time to like open that back up or lean into it and not be afraid or run away from it.
Yeah. Yes, totally. And that's actually funny that you said that because there's distinct memories that I have now that I've looked at as an adult. And I know that it was loved ones or my higher self like speaking to me. There was just certain experiences that I had where I would like hear things or see things. But then you just, like you said, you just brush them off and you're just like, okay, whatever, moving on. And yeah,
Absolutely. I know I would like be home alone and hear people walking and talking upstairs. And I'm like, okay, well, that
yeah,
must just be, I
yeah.
don't know what my explanation was at that time. But yeah, I think it's so important to revisit those times as you're developing it now in adulthood to again validate those
Mhm.
experiences. So that way you can kind of lean into that trust again of like your inner child and that childlike wonderment that we lose over time. I'd love to kind of dive into the work that you're doing currently and what it is that you have to offer and some of the impacts that you've been seeing with your clients.
Yes, so I offer one-to-one sessions. I also offer a one-to-one mentorship. And then I also, my baby is The Goddess in You, which I developed, and it's based off of my own healing journey through my divorce. So basically, that teaches women how to come back home to themselves, how to remember who they are, how to remember how to care for themselves and honor themselves. And a lot of it is healing core wounds, looking at your beliefs, and it's also regulating the nervous system. And it's a process of really learning how to go inward, learning how to work with the body, and then learning how to meditate and set up your own spiritual practice. But it's basically all the components that I went through. And yeah, it's just been a really great experience working with these women because there's just been tremendous transformation. It's like you're allowed to feel joy again and also have clarity and confidence to move forward. So it's been a really powerful experience. And then, of course, I love my one on one sessions and my one on one mentorship. And those are really just tailored to whatever they need at the time. So if someone is having a challenge that they're going through, I'm just going to tailor it to whatever they need. That means doing energetic healing or readings in conjunction with teaching them some tools that they can walk away with to tap in further or to regulate their nervous system or whatever it is. I incorporate all of the modalities basically.
Yeah, just like really catered to each individual. Everybody needs a different level of it. And I really love with your program that you run that it's directly related to what works for you and being able to spread that, because I think that's really what we're all here for. I think that I'm a strong believer that our trauma or experiences are there to teach us something or allow us to reach a higher perspective. And I always hear that phrase of like, you survived your toughest challenges so that you could be a guiding light to somebody else, or the similar phrases like, even though it's difficult and we can't negate those feelings that we went through, it's like at least we can take that power back and turn it into purpose.
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing that I like people to know is, well, two things actually. Number one, mediumship is just really connecting with energy. Like I feel like up until I began this process myself, I always thought like psychic abilities were just for a select few, but it's really just connecting with energy. And we are energy. So it's a process of getting into that energetic space. That was the number one thing. And then number two, a lot of what I teach in my program and with my clients is just that healing and spirituality, setting up a spiritual practice is not a one size fits all. What works for me might not work for you. And so that's why I try to give everyone as many tools as possible that they can try on and see how it works for them. I love breath work, but I've had some clients that just really aren't into it and they would rather do other somatic practices. And so, yeah, I think it's important to understand too. People get very discouraged with meditation or trying to quiet the mind because it's so difficult, but there's so many avenues to get into that space, whether it's doing yoga and really just focusing on the breath and stretching and being present, or doing body scans. There's all these different ways that we can work with the body and work with energy. And it's just a matter of finding which one really resonates with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody is more accustomed to certain modalities, and that's perfectly fine. It is a little bit of trial and error, like finding what really fits and what resonates and what you feel has the most impact over. I love what you said about the mediumship aspect, really just being about energy, because again, there's this sort of idea that these things are, again, for a selected amount of people, you have to be like at a certain level of understanding in order to access it, all of these things. But all of this is available to everyone at any time. It's just a matter of tapping into it and really like developing those skills and those muscles, because again, it feels so unnatural when you first start. But it's the same thing with like, Reiki, energy healing, whatever it is, like everybody has access to those types of healing modalities if they chose to go that route. But I also think it's beautiful just for people who maybe don't go in that direction and utilize their intuition for their creativity or whatever job it is that they're in or whatever passion projects. Like they don't have to be directly related to the energy. It's really just finding what it is that you're meant for.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
Amazing. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. I'm so glad that we got to have this conversation. I'd love for the listeners to know maybe where to find you so they can connect.
Yes, so they can connect with me through my website, which is leahrosehealing.com. I'm also on Instagram a little bit. I've just kind of started dipping my toe into Instagram. I'm at I am Leah Rose with a space after, it's like an underscore. Instagram does that when you do a space, it gives you an underscore.
Right,
So
right.
it's I am Leah Rose. Those are the two places. Those are the best places to reach me.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure to include those in the description as well. Thank you again so much for your time and can't wait to just continue to stay connected.
Yes, likewise. Thank you so much for having me on. And it was so nice to chat with you.
If you enjoyed this episode or any previous episodes, please don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast. I'm so excited for some of the upcoming content and can't wait to share with you so soon. Until then, bye for now.